If you ever worked for a leading consulting firm like McKinsey or BCG, as I did, or if you're working in an environment in corporate where you're often interacting with CEOs, CFOs and so on, you will quickly notice that there's a certain language, certain concepts, certain phrases that these people frequently use that are sometimes hard to understand if you have not gone through this very development. And it is, of course, I would argue, advantageous if you understand these concepts, because if you use them yourself, this shows that you are an insider, that you've been part of this environment, which often increases your credibility. So let's go over 12 of these basic ideas. And the first is the expression of top line and bottom line. Top line and bottom line. This is coming from the P&L, the profit and loss statement of a company, the most important financial statement, arguably, of a company. And the top line refers to the very first line in the statement, which is typically the revenue line. So the line indicating what the revenue of a company is. So top line just means revenue. And this is often used in the context of top line initiatives, top line measures, the top line effects that certain things are going to have. So somebody is referring to revenue, they're referring to top line. And so if you have ideas, for instance, how to increase revenue, you might just call these top line growth ideas or top line ideas, top line initiatives that you are pushing for. And in the same spirit, the bottom line, if somebody's talking about the bottom line, this refers to the bottom line, the last line of the financial statement of the P&L, which typically is the profit. So bottom line means profit. So if somebody's talking about, for instance, bottom line impact, this person means the impact that a certain measure, certain initiative will have on the profit of a company. Next, organic versus inorganic growth. Often this is used in the context of growth. Organic growth means that this is growth coming from the key operations of the company. So based on some ideas, some measures, maybe some market tailwinds, maybe the revenue is growing. Inorganic growth means growth that is coming from an acquisition typically. So you are buying another company, of course, then suddenly you have a big jump in revenue 1 year after the other because you're just adding the revenue of the other company. And this is then what is described as inorganic growth. Next, I just used the term as well, as you may have noticed, headwinds versus tailwinds. Headwinds versus tailwinds. And this refers to the concept that there are often effects that help you. These are tailwinds, so the winds that giving you a push from behind, and often there are effects at play that actually are not helping you, right? That are going against you. And these are the headwinds, the wind that is coming against you. And often this is used, for instance, in the context of market analysis, where you're analyzing what are the effects that will benefit a market and the effects that will not benefit a market. Often this is used in the context of due diligences. If you're looking at maybe new companies, understand what are the factors, positive and negative, that are affecting this company. So you see this actually quite a lot, also on slides and reports, headwinds and tailwinds as this pair of terms. Next, capital allocation. And this is more a concept and a mindset that you need to understand, because if you're trying to put yourself into the shoes of a CEO, arguably the most important job that a CEO has is to understand and to decide where the resources of an organization, the capital, the personnel and so on, needs to be allocated. So often if you're having conversations with these very senior people, this is top of mind for them. This is what they care about. Where are they allocating the resources? Are they placing their bets in the right way? And this is the way how you want to think about this. And then of course also talk about this as well. If you are working with senior leaders in corporate, you know that besides these terms, something else is important, and this is to create professional, high-quality slide documents. And this is why I'm sharing also here for free a slide library, a deck of lots of slide layouts that you can use as well for your work. Link to this free download in the video description. These are slides that also I use myself in my own time in consulting. Hope this is helpful to you, but now back to the video. Next, you see all types of funny terms here: COGS, SG&A, D&A, PPE, and so on. So if only one of these terms is not clear to you, if only one of those you don't know, this is a problem. Because these are very basic, very fundamental, like first year of university style accounting expressions. So these are expressions, and probably I could add even many more to them. These are expressions that you commonly find on financial statements of companies, on a P&L, for instance, on a balance sheet. And if you don't know what these mean, essentially what you're saying is that you never properly read financial statements, which of course by itself already disqualifies you from any like senior position, right? This shows that you never had P&L responsibility, that you never worked together with people who had P&L responsibility. So this directly is a red flag for anybody senior if they're talking to you and you don't know what this means, that you are clueless with regards to topics that top managers care about. And if you're interested in these types of topics, topics, I recently created a video on OPEX versus CAPEX, which are actually terms that I arguably could add to this list as well. I will link the video somewhere above here if you're interested in that. Feel free to check it out. Next, the idea of a run rate. A run rate. Often if you're looking at financial figures, for instance revenue, there's an historic trend how this figure developed. And if somebody is talking about a run rate, typically what this means is that this person is now taking, in this example, the revenue figure of the last period, for instance of the last month, and is then saying, okay, if we are taking just this last month's revenue in this example, and they're just pretending that the revenue will always now perform like this, this is then the run rate. Essentially taking the last figures and then just extrapolating them into the future, the run rate. Often, of course, this is used to also make somewhat exaggerated projections for the future, but sometimes, of course, it is also correct to not build a projection based on the whole historic body of values, but there's the last value, because maybe the last value will be most representative of how this figure will perform going forward. Next, the idea of first order and second order effects. First order and second order effects. And there are two ways how you think about this. The first is, of course, that often in management, you need to anticipate not only the first order effects, but also the second order effects, which is why people use these terms and talk about that. So the first order effect might be that you are launching a new product, right? And maybe this then might spark some attention and people are buying this product. So the immediate effect of what you're doing. But then the second order effect is that then maybe competitors are reacting to that. Maybe competitors are then launching similar products as well. This then might put price pressure on you, might deteriorate the margins, and maybe then there was even a shift from other products that you have to this new product that you launch. So these are things that you want to anticipate as well and understand if they're actually worth it. This is the one way of talking about it, but then the other way, how this term first and second order effect is often used as well, is in financial modeling or in modeling of effects. Because often you might have effects that then actually interact with each other. So if you're modeling, for instance, a positive market trend, that due to a positive market next year, maybe you might be able to sell more. But then in addition to them, you might also in the same model work with an assumption that you are able to reduce your COGS, so the cost of goods sold, based as a percentage of the total revenue of the market. Of course, then you might have this delta of that. There's actually, if you compare it to maybe last year's historic figures, also the additional incremental effect of having a reduced COGS not only on the historic figure, but also now on the incremental growth figure. So you might want to multiply the incremental market growth, then also by the incremental reduction in COGS to then have this second order effect as well. And here actually the takeaway is that often this gets ignored. At least for simple back of the envelope style calculations, often you ignore second order effects because these are not very significant and make the life significantly easier for you if you just do not look at them. Next, the expression of top of mind or CEO agenda. And yes, this is supposed to be a light bulb. And actually, I think I used these terms myself already now, also here in the last minutes of this video. And this is this mindset that you want to adopt both if you are working in top management consulting in one of these large strategy consulting firms, but also if you're working in a very strategic department or a senior role in corporate, you always want to ask yourself, what is currently top of mind of your C-level, of your direct superiors? What is currently the CEO agenda of your company or of your CEO indeed? Because the implication is that if you're playing into things, with things that you're doing, into things that are top of mind for these people, into this CEO agenda, then this will significantly help you to get visibility, get the budget, get the resources. And often it is also about framing, right? So maybe you want to do a certain thing or you want to push for a certain thing. And this is actually also true for sales, or for instance, tech sales, right? Maybe you want to sell a solution. And this will be significantly easier if you are able to help the other side, the counterparty, to understand how this initiative, how this idea is connected to the things that are top of mind for this very person or that are part of the CEO agenda, because this then maybe also helps your direct superior to then push forward with it and then make the case for that. Next, this idea of 80-20 versus this idea of boiling the ocean. And these two expressions mark contradicting, like both sides of a coin, like two ends of a spectrum, right? And if you indeed really don't know what 80-20 is, actually I would think that most of you do. I created a video about that in the past as well. I will link it somewhere above here as well. But 80-20 describes the idea that often 20% of the action leads 80% of the result. If you're doing, for instance, some type of research, typically the first 20% of the time gives you 80% of the outcome. And then the other side of that, of course, is that you then need to invest an additional 80% to then get to the last 20% of it. And this is actually a principle that applies to many, many other things and ideas in productivity. Often the first steps are the ones that get you the furthest. If you learn for an exam, the first 20% of time typically invest in it will give you 80% of the outcome. And then it's only if you really want to optimize for like all the last details, really know everything, where you then need to invest an overproportionate amount of time to get it all. And if somebody tells you, hey, we need to work 80-20, which is a very common expression, it means that typically you should not do it all, but you should only do the most important things. So you're allowed to take some shortcuts. And the opposite of 80-20 is to boil the ocean. Yeah, so often actually people say like this as well. So let's do it 80-20. Let's not boil the ocean. And boiling the ocean, the picture here is that, as you can imagine, it takes an extreme, an insurmountable amount of energy, of time, of work, obviously, to boil an ocean. That's probably not even probably possible with all the energy we might have on the planet. Yeah? And so the idea is, of course, you don't want to boil the ocean. Boil the ocean means essentially that you do everything, so that you don't do the 80-20, but that you do the 100%. This is often, at least, depends on the task, what you want to avoid, and then rather you go 80-20. Next, the idea of sunk cost. The idea of sunk cost. This is a very common term used in business. So if you have some type of business education, I'm sure you came across it. If you don't, maybe you don't, and then you should learn about it right now, right here. And the idea of sunk cost is that sometimes you make an investment. You pay for something in the past, and now you need to ask yourself going forward, what is now the next best thing, the next decision that I should take? And the idea is that if you are paying for something in the past, this past payment should in principle be irrelevant for now the future decision. Let's make an example. Let's say you invested 5 million in a software system. So you already paid 5 million in a software system. But now 1 year, 2 years, 3 years later, you realize actually to some extent it didn't work very well. The software system is not giving you the results that you hope it would give you. And now you are facing a decision. You're facing a decision to now invest additional money in this software system, or you could completely scrap this software system that you invested $5 million in and think of maybe going with a new vendor and doing it all from scratch. And now many people will feel like, shoot, I already invested 5 million in it. So for sure now I need to rather stick with the system and invest even more to make it work. But the idea of sunk cost is that this is what you should completely disregard, and the only thing that is relevant for your decision is what is the additional amount you would need to invest in this old system to make it work, compared to what actually would cost you to work with a new vendor and set it up from scratch. And if then it is still beneficial to work with the old system, you do that, but if actually realize that just starting from scratch with a new vendor is better, even though you already invested the 5 million, so essentially this is just what you should disregard. You should go with the new vendor. And this is often a fallacy that people don't understand this. They take sunk cost into consideration. This is not what you should do. This is sunk cost. Another idea is this idea of the upside and the downside of a decision. Upside and downside. Thinking in upsides and downsides. And often people struggle with, if they're looking into decisions, that of course it's sometimes difficult to very exactly quantify decisions, to get a numerical understanding of what the impact will be, and then they just withdraw essentially and don't analyze it at all. The idea of upside and downside is essentially independent of probabilities, just to understand what are the positive things that could arise from a decision and what are the negative things that could arise from a decision. Now, beyond numbers, beyond probabilities and exact values, what is the upside, the positive thing that could happen, and what is the downside? And often just thinking about that already gives you a lot of clarity whether actually doing something makes sense or not. Thinking in upsides and downsides. And last, SteerCos, steering committees. This is a term very frequently used in consulting and actually a general management methodology that is very commonly used in corporate. We even use it in our tech company. And the idea is that for every big high-level initiative, often there is a project lead, and of course in consulting this might be you if you're working for the consulting company, and then every other week, every maybe 1, every 2, every 3 weeks, there is a steering committee, a SteerCo, where then the project lead, the project team presents results to the board of the project sponsors, so to the C-level people, the project sponsors, the decision makers, and then in these meetings they present, and then the project owners, the project sponsors, they give direction, they give guidance. So steering committee, SteerCo is a very common management style. Let me know if you have any additional expressions you want to add or what you think about this, if you ever came across any of them. If you took any value out of this video, please like and subscribe. Thanks to all the channel members. Looking forward to see you soon here on the channel next week.